Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I am continuing my analysis of the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. Today's discussion will be devaluation, verbal abuse, and narcissistic speech patterns. Is there any evidence of this, and what does it mean from a particular image? Let's get started quickly. Let me give you my disclaimers just before. I am not diagnosing anybody. I feel that there is some importance in reviewing this since everybody is watching it, and there are a lot of direct and indirect issues that have to do with substance abuse, mental health, childhood trauma, toxic relationships, and it is an opportunity to bring some of these to the forefront and teach some formal thinking. This kind of thing, whatever is going on, is important in relation to all individuals, not just the rich and famous. Let's get started. Let me begin with a very short clip from, I think, day 6 of the trial, April 20th, and here we go.
Mr. Depp,
Good morning.
yesterday you told us a little bit about the beginning of your relationship with Miss Heard. When did Miss Heard's behavior towards you begin to change?
I believe, as I said yesterday, there was a hint of something with the, having to do with the boots coming off and breaking routine. Her attitude, the way that she would begin to speak to me. First things started coming up, and I was suddenly just wrong about everything. If I made a statement about something that I had been familiar with, for example, in my work,
Let's stop right there, okay? Presuming Johnny Depp is telling the truth, okay? Suddenly, I was just wrong about everything, okay? And he is going to go on and make a comment about his work. This is a seasoned, well-known, reputable actor who, as far as we can tell in general, does take his craft in general seriously, and his approach to arts, crafts, acting is maybe heightened. Okay, he takes some pride in the way he does these things. He's been doing this for 30 years. He's twice this person's age. Presuming he's telling the truth here about what he's describing, all of a sudden, everything I said and did was wrong. This is someone that's half his age. There seems to have been almost a splitting that occurred. Splitting, people often talk about that with histrionic personality disorders, with borderlines and so forth. But this could very potentially signal, and he may be describing, again, I don't know enough about the case, about these two individuals, but we have seen quite a bit information come out, quite a bit of witness testimony. We can judge for ourselves what we consider credible or not credible. Each one of us has a different capacity to do that, with some value and error depending on our historical and professional background. But it seems to me that he is describing the beginning of a devaluation that is often described both in the cultural vernacular and the professional literature of a narcissistic personality disorder, or I don't even like to use that term. I like the more general term for me. The way I use it is pathological narcissism. The beginning of devaluation. Let's continue watching a little bit more what's going on here.
I'd been chopping away at for a good 30-some years. I was suddenly wrong. And then beyond that, if you try to explain yourself and correct the problem, the misunderstanding, it would then begin to heighten as Miss Hurd was unable to be wrong. It just didn't.
Let's stop right there again. Miss Hurd was unable to be wrong. And you know what? Let's keep her on the screen here. Miss Hurd was unable to be wrong. Again, presuming he's telling the truth, my suspicion for the most part is I am comfortable in presuming that there is quite a bit of truth there given the other testimonies I have heard, the cross-examinations I have heard, and the general body of information that has come to me. Keep in mind, I'm still on day 15 of the trial, so where it's gone from there, I don't know, and I haven't seen it all. That's important. But Miss Hurd was unable to be wrong. Again, that appears to me, if it's true, a red flag for potential toxic, pathological narcissism. Unable to be wrong, okay? Intolerable to be wrong. I have extensive experience with managing chronic wounds for many, many, many years. I even have spent time, I am well seasoned and experienced in that. And some time back, I remember talking to somebody who suffers from this condition, and they had put a Band-Aid that was wet on a wound that was wet on a small child. And I pulled off the Band-Aid. It was very wet under there. The conditions were starting to solidify for possible bacterial growth or fungal growth, poor healing, adverse outcomes, and everything else. And I simply took it off. And I stated to the person, look, that you don't really want to put a Band-Aid on that kind of wound. You want to leave it open to the air. The person literally started to shudder, and their facial expressions contorted worse than it usually does. That is not normal behavior, okay? Unable to be wrong. The ego cannot process being wrong. And in fact, if we are talking about pathological narcissism to a great extent, we are talking about a perfectionist, as odd as that sounds. Sometimes the pathological narcissism is so disabling in that area of expression of not being able to be wrong and not being able to take criticism. It is so disabling, and they are such perfectionists, it goes outside of our experience of what a perfectionist is, but it essentially freezes the narcissist in life where they cannot participate or take action on any activity. It's very interesting. And he just kind of states she was unable to be wrong. Let's continue with what's going on here.
Happened. She couldn't be wrong. So these little digs, and it would commence.
By the way, this is my own little piece here, my own take here. I just want to sidestep here as I look at Amber Heard, and it's hard to see anything in her, right? I see quite a bit of anger. I see quite a bit of resentment, but you know what? I'm going to reserve that for another time, but let's continue.
With sort of demeaning, name-calling, berated, sort of to be made a fool of.
More devaluation.
And those would escalate into a full-scale argument. And in the beginning, as one does, one sticks up for oneself in a debate, as it were, or an argument over something, to try to prove the point. But when it escalates and then
It's hard to explain. And he goes on to give a further description, which we'll get back to. What is Johnny Depp talking about here? Okay, we've established that potentially there is devaluation going on. Okay, and that itself is really abusive. Abusive using language and triggering someone's emotion, psychological state, sense of self-worth, etc., etc. That may be happening if Johnny Depp is telling the truth. But what is he talking about here? Let's watch a little bit more.
Would start here, and then it would roll around and become this circular thing of its own. So
what is he trying to explain? The argument would start here, roll around, and become this circular thing of its own. Okay? Now, given the fact that I've listened to quite a bit of Amber Heard's testimony, and I've been watching different descriptions of these arguments and him trying to get away from it, potentially, if he is telling the truth, one, we know there was verbal abuse, done, okay? But it's possible that something else is going on. And do you know what the name of it is? Palindromic speech acts. Let's just kind of break this down and look at this. It's one of the worst things you can do to somebody. Palindrome, it's a word that is spelled the same forward and backward. Dad. Wow. Okay, these are words that are spelled the same forward and backward. Let me say something about speech act. This is a term, concept familiar with a lot of academics, in particular, I think, but to me most importantly, philosophers of language, which really John Searle from UC Berkeley, at least that's where he was last, really had a lot to say about this. In fact, he wrote a book on it. And it's talking about how language is action, so speech acts, okay? Palindromic speech acts, and I'll tell you why in a minute, why the action part is important. Palindromic speech acts. If you really want to find out about this more, Charles Derber, okay? Charles Derber, who's a sociologist that works in the area of conversational analysis, excellent. Sam Vaknin, psychologist. He gives an amazing description of this in describing the speech acting patterns of narcissists, okay? So palindromic speech acts is the way a narcissist talks. Others may talk that way, but it's very particular, and it's a good description of the communication that a narcissist has with a significant other. And more often, and in fact, you need the development and a historical interaction between the abuser and the abused, the narcissist and the victim, for this language style to develop and be powerful. And it would be in a situation like this where there's a couple. So whether it's early in the interaction where it's just verbal abuse, history, time, interaction builds enough of a history and narrative between two people where the palindromic speech acts develop. What is it? Basically, it is meant to confuse, okay, disorient, okay, the listener. Over time, this has a profound effect on the listener. During these types of conversations, okay, the narcissist has no intention of communicating anything factual in regards to the point of the conversation, okay? During these conversations, the narcissist, the goal, whether it's conscious or subconscious, is A, to conceal. Potentially one or all of these or more and more. A, to conceal. B, to potentially abuse in a very sadistic way to throw somebody off of their reality base. Okay? Control, manipulate, conceal. Okay? These are just some of the things that this kind of conversation imposes on the listener, okay? Confuse, control, manipulate, conceal, okay? And this could be the beginning of what is going on, and Johnny Depp is trying to explain. And this is what he may have felt during these times that inspired him to take off and hide in different rooms in the house. Okay? When you talk to people that suffer or engage in long periods of engagement with a narcissist or an abuser that is utilizing such language, palindromic speech acts, in their engagement with them, whether it's during argument or any other time, you will find that it is surreal, Kafkaesque, okay, nightmarish, and ghoulish. Over long periods of time, the one who's on the receiving end really starts to check out from reality and just simply engage in the fantasy demanded and created by the abuser of this kind of language. Let me give a couple of examples and then say a few more things about this. And here is an example. And I can't recall if these examples I got from someone else or came up with myself, but I have a note here to give you a couple of examples. You know, let's say you are in a relationship with an abuser who uses palindromic speech acts, and one of the things, your reality is really becoming disentangled in any kind of coherent way by now, okay? And every single day, you want to know what time they're coming home from work. And it might start off as, when you're coming home after work, when you're coming home after work. And eventually it's going to proceed to, what time are you coming home from work? What time do you get off from work? That question will be evaded, even though the person doesn't have an irregular schedule. They get off work at 6 p.m. So in the beginning, it might be what time you're coming, when you're coming home after work. And this allows the abuser a lot of leeway. Okay, a lot of leeway to be able to manipulate reality and shove it down your throat. One day they show up at 10 p.m. and they have come home, and a significant other is like, where in the heck have you been? I've been worried sick. And they will turn this rapidly into an argument. I told you I'm going to come home after work. And they will actually turn this whole thing and flip it and blame the person for being controlling, being overbearing, and not listening to them, being stupid. And in fact, how can they talk to them that way when they are working hard on bringing money home? In fact, they were out with a workmate and basically just cheated and got drunk. But in their mind, they create this fantasy, this delusion that has nothing to do with reality, that they were doing this for the benefit of the family, so that the family can have a better life, because if they make that person happy that they went out drinking with and cheated with, they will potentially get a raise and make more money. And that is the fantasy world of the narcissist, and now you have become guilty. Let's look at this a little bit more and talk about it in terms of what is the narcissist gaining by this kind of language? What is the value? That sometimes they enjoy sadistic abuse, control, not being committed to a single thing over time, and they're imposing a fantasy reality on you that you cannot escape from. It is very possible, and that's enough said on this thing. You can look it up, and some guys know much more about this than me, but it's very possible that this interaction that Johnny Depp is describing, and we see descriptions as such all over the testimonies, he is describing potentially palindromic speech acts and verbal abuse, which is so emotionally damaging to the significant other. And if you ever see one that has been under this sort of abuse for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, they are a ghost, because by this time they have grossly checked out of reality. And now you can explain why there may be substance abuse in there. Kind of kidding, kind of not, but it is one of the escapes of such folks. Hey, if you enjoy my analysis, please like, please subscribe, please give me a thumbs up, give me some feedback in the comments below, and if you're so inclined, please go ahead and utilize Patreon. I'm kind of enjoying doing these, and I hope you like it too. Tell me how you feel. Peace.